also find yourself moved by tonight's edition of 2020.
A 3 News presentation. Award-winning current affairs with Karen Pickersgill, Amanda Miller, Richard Langston, Anna Kenner, and Mike McRoberts. This is 2020.
Kia ora, good evening, I'm Karen Pickersgill. Tonight, a Nelson couple hounded by bureaucracy, driven to the brink by government departments demanding money they didn't have.
Every day there were letters in the post from WIMS. They always demand letters. They will always pay within 7 or 14 days. And I just decided that I just didn't want to be here anymore. I believed if I wasn't here, they wouldn't be able to recover it.
Justice Doog was conducting the judicial review. He described it as the most disturbing case he'd heard in all his years as a judge.
Scientists caught on the rim of the crater as a volcano erupts.
A few rocks tumble down the crater, which happens all the time.
But then, more rocks.
We gotta get out of here.
But it's too late. Suddenly, a massive blast.
Powerful explosion shredded the rocks in pieces.
Molten missiles firing from the crater at speeds faster than a bullet. Desperately, he tries to outrun the fusillade of glowing rocks.
And men sentenced to death for crimes they didn't commit.
While others are marrying, buying a home, having their first child, you are in prison. It doesn't matter how much you yell that you're innocent. I mean, there's nobody there to hear it.
No one cares.
For 14 years, Michael Graham has prayed for this day, the day he would walk off Louisiana's death row to freedom. So what does the state give him? He gets $10 and a coat.
Here's $10 a coat. Goodbye. I mean, talk about a crime.
All that tonight on 2020. It was a nightmare from which they couldn't escape. A Nelson couple hounded by local bureaucrats, pursued for money they didn't have and apparently didn't even owe. Letters, phone calls, demands that went on for years. Ian and Linda Worrell didn't know how to put a stop to the harassment. All they knew was they'd done nothing wrong. A High Court judge has described what happened as a chapter of errors that beggars belief. Anna Kenner with the story.
A lot of stress, a lot of worry. Is it going to go away? Is it going to come back? You can't fight somebody that big on your own.
It's been going now for nearly 8 years, and they have literally hounded us into the ground.
This is a case that's generated mountains of paperwork, lined the pockets of several lawyers, and stolen the best years of a young couple's life. A tortuous tale of how little people can get clobbered by bureaucracy. A story that shocked even a High Court judge.
So I put the electrodes on around the area of the pain, and then we just plug the electrodes into the TENS machine. It's going 125 electric shocks a minute. And I just sit here for a while like this. Or if I want to move,
Ian Worrell's daily ritual to ease the pain. The result of a motorbike accident, then a medical mishap that left him with a serious bone disease.
If you turn it up too high, it hurts quite a lot.
These days, Ian enjoys a stroll on the beach with his family. But for years, his leg was so painful he couldn't stand, let alone walk.
Had some pretty heavy medication for it sometimes, and didn't know who I was or where I was. Yeah, it was just pretty bad.
But not as bad as the 8 years of hell Ian Worrell says he and his wife have suffered at the hands of WINS. The couple's troubles began in 1992. Ian was on ACC at that time, but after an operation on his leg, he tried to go back to work.
4 years sitting on a benefit is just not very good. You kind of like lose your direction after a while, so it was time to go out and get on.
Ian got a job labouring at a Nelson fish processing company.
and I worked there for 2 days, stacking crates and all that, and it was just too much. The pain was too much.
Must have been disappointing for you.
It was very disappointing, yeah.
But there was to be another disappointment. ACC wouldn't reinstate Ian's weekly payments. The couple were told
We now belonged to social welfare and we were no longer their problem.
so the Worrells went to WINS, or social welfare as it was then called, and signed on for the unemployment benefit. But the Worrells still believed Ian should be getting ACC, so they took the matter to court. It took 2 years, but they won their case, and ACC was told to reinstate Ian's earnings-related compensation and to backdate it. In other words, ACC had to pay him a lump sum for the 2 years he'd missed out on. Problem was, social welfare had already paid him for that period.
The first thing I said to Ian then was, we need to go and see WINS because they've been paying us. Fully aware you can't get 2 benefits and fully aware that we wouldn't have ever asked for that.
At WINS, an employee tried to work out how much they owed.
He came back with a figure in excess of $40,000, and I laughed, but he laughed as well. He said, I think I've made a mistake. I said, yes, so do I. It just seemed a huge, huge amount of money for a 2-year period, and I thought something's not quite right with it.
But Linda was told not to worry. She and Ian hadn't received the backdated money yet, so the departments would simply work it out between them. ACC would reimburse WINS and pay any extra to the Worrells.
So you thought they'd sort it out between them?
Oh, yeah, that's what you expect, the 2 government departments.
When $27,000 appeared in the Worrells' bank account 2 weeks later, they thought the departments had settled up, and it was the extra payment they were entitled to. They paid $9,000 to their lawyer, spent $14,000 on a car, and paid some bills. Then a shock in the mail. A letter from WINS.
It said that we owed in excess of $40,000 to them for overpayment of benefits and that we had 7 days to pay it.
What about you, Ian? When you saw there in black and white that you owed in excess of $40,000, what did you think?
It couldn't be right. There's no way it could be right. We just got just over 20,000 in the bank, and here they were wanting 42,000. So you got to naturally assume it's a mistake.
The Worrells didn't believe they owed the $27,000, let alone $40,000. It was only later, when they were checking through documents, that they began to understand what had happened. The ACC paid WINS only a portion of the money it had asked for. That's why WINS went after the Worrells. Went after them with a mission.
Every day there were letters in the post from WINS. They always demand letters. They will always pay within 7 or 14 days. There was never one, there was always 2. One addressed to Ian, one addressed to myself. And that was every day, Monday through to Saturday's mail. There were messages on our answer phone every day. There were phone calls made by them every day. It was constant pressure.
I thought it was the worst case of its kind I'd ever encountered, frankly.
Christchurch barrister James O'Neill. He took over the case 2 years ago.
They were a very large department that was committed to a course of action and wouldn't recognise or acknowledge that there were errors being made and that the people they were pursuing were the victims of those errors.
Another one of those review the decision jobbies.
But even now the Worrells can't understand how WINS worked out the huge sums they were demanding. Even the department seemed confused.
Some letters came with 36,000 on, others came with 26,000, 29,000.
What did you make of that?
We didn't know what to make of it.
To this day, I don't understand their mathematics, and I don't think they did either, because letters would apologise for the mistakes in previous letters.
We didn't know how much to pay, and honestly, we didn't think we owed it. We really didn't think we owed it. We thought they'd made a mistake.
In 1996, the Worrells took their case to the Social Security Appeal Authority, which blamed ACC for the problem, for not reimbursing WINS enough. But that got the Worrells nowhere, because ACC said it was the fault of WINS, or Income Support Services as it was then called, and that they should sort the matter out. A senior ACC manager wrote,
I think it would be reasonable for ISS to reconsider the circumstances in which this error occurred and to reconsider whether any adjustment to their decision regarding the Worrells is appropriate. We would be prepared to partake in any mediated discussion in this matter. We recognise that Mr. and Mrs. Worrell are victims in this matter.
If that advice had been taken up, this whole sorry saga could have been concluded years ago. If the parties were prepared to stop blaming each other, that is ACC and WINS, for what had happened, to sit down and actually work things out, recognising that Mr. and Mrs. Worrell were not responsible for the predicament they found themselves in.
But for the Worrells, the nightmare continued. For another 4 years, WINS debt collectors continued to hound them. One phone call threatening to bankrupt them almost drove Linda to suicide.
I hung up the phone, I sat down, cried, which was quite commonplace here for a number of years. I don't know, I guess all I can say is something in my mind kind of went, and I just decided that I just didn't want to be here anymore. I believed if I wasn't here, they wouldn't be able to recover it.
Would you ever believe that that would be the toll that this fight would take?
No, never. I don't believe anybody's got a right to push you that far.
The toll was great, both physically and psychologically.
Dr. Jim Aitken was the Worrells' GP. He watched the couple's health deteriorate under the stress.
There was real anxiety, depression within the household, and they both changed personality quite dramatically.
How did it make you feel as their GP sitting on the sidelines and watching that?
It made me feel very sad that people can be destroyed or almost destroyed by bureaucracy.
After Linda's suicide attempt, WINS laid off for a while, but soon the pressure was back on. At this stage, Ian was studying computing and working part-time. WINS got an order to take money from his wages.
I was only after probably about $50 a week at that stage, but I was only doing 6 hours work a week, and that was our total income at that stage.
And what was your reaction to that?
Very angry, actually, yeah. I was very angry.
The letters, the constant phone calls, and attempts to tamper with their limited income began to take an even greater toll.
I got a really bad pain sort of up my neck into the back of my head. It sort of felt like someone had hit me with an axe. One of the worst headache pains I'd ever had.
Linda suffered a mild stroke while she and Ian were arguing over the debt.
I had to almost learn to talk again. The words were in my head, but I couldn't get them out to make a proper sentence. The safe house was a clever setup, Luke saw.
Linda says it was her son Ben who got her through, insisting she read to him every day.
It was a smart camouflage. From outside, you'd never expect to have found all this.
They were victims of a system that was inflexible and intransigent and was prone to human error. And an apparent belief that it's all right to spend tens of thousands of dollars of taxpayers' money pursuing what they define as a debt of a lesser magnitude. It's not good economics.
But WINS would argue that by law, they had to chase an apparent overpayment.
No, the Act gives them the power to recover overpayments, but the Act also gives them a discretion to write off overpayments, and have argued consistently that it wasn't a suitable case for writing off the debt. I personally can't think of a better case.
So O'Neill took the case to the High Court, where what would normally have been a fairly dull procedural matter turned into high drama. Justice Doog was conducting the judicial review. He described it as the most disturbing case he'd heard in all his years as a judge. Justice Doog had no patience for WINS' explanation for pursuing the Worrells. He said he found the department's conduct astonishing, and their attitude and letters they'd written to the Worrells beggared belief. He said the department should have tried to mediate the matter long ago, and it should never have ended up in court.
I've been practicing for 17 or so years as a barrister, and I've never encountered a case where the judge has been so blunt in his condemnation of the conduct of a major Department of State.
Justice Doog ordered Wins to write off the debt, which he said had arisen because of errors by the department and its officers, contributed to by ACC. In his written judgment, he said,
"It's fair to say, without disclosing sad details of their personal lives, that the Worrells are people deserving of benefits and welfare. Their lives have been difficult, and the consequences of the present dispute, extending as it has done over such a substantial period of time, have clearly contributed to their problems. Their innocence in this affair."
I think the part that really hit home was the part when he said that we were innocent, because we have been from day one.
It was nice to actually feel that somebody was listening to us and actually seeing what had gone wrong over the years.
What will stick in your mind mostly about this case?
The joy on Mrs. Worrell's face when it was all over.
They wanted to clear their name, and they wanted to hold their heads up high, and they have, I'm sure, done the right thing by fighting this to the end.
2020 wanted to ask Wins about its response to the judge's comments, but they declined to appear on our program. Instead, they sent us a written statement in which they say they believed they had a responsibility to recover the debt. However, they do accept that some aspects of the service Mr. and Mrs. Worrell received were less than ideal. They say they've written to the couple this week to express regret for the distress and frustration they no doubt experienced. Little comfort for the Worrells, who say the fight with Wins has cost them almost everything. They'd like to sue the department for compensation, but they can't afford it.
If I had the money, I would do it in a heartbeat for what they've done to my family. I would do it 10 times for what they've done to my family.
All Linda and Ian Worrell ever wanted was to be independent of welfare. Despite the turmoil of the last 8 years, they've achieved it. With the help of ACC, Ian has studied and gained a host of qualifications in computing. He and Linda now work at the Nelson Marlborough Institute of Technology.
Help desk, Linda speaking.
Has there been anything positive come out of this?
Yeah, one thing. They have to write their debt off. They can't ever write to me again. They can't ever ring my house. And it's a win. It's a big win for us.
The ACC has now changed its policy. In cases like this, it reimburses Wins the full amount of any duplicated benefits. Too late for the Worrells. That Mount Galeras should erupt wasn't much of a surprise. It's known to be one of the most unpredictable volcanoes in the world. What was shocking was the violent explosion occurred just as a team of top volcanologists peered into the crater. The volcano experts were there to determine just how dangerous the mountain was, and they found out in the most dramatic and disastrous way possible. As John Quinones will show you, the whole catastrophe was captured on video by a local cameraman.
This is what brought so many scientists to the mountains of Colombia. Nevada del Ruiz, a towering volcano restless for months, suddenly explodes in a massive eruption. Instantly, a glacier of snow at its summit melts, and a tidal wave of mud and debris thunders straight toward the town of Armero, 35 miles away in the valley. Armero is obliterated, drowned in an ocean of mud. 23,000 people die in one of the deadliest disasters of the 20th century. So to prevent that from ever happening again, those scientists came to this peak at 14,000 feet. Galeras looms, venting gases and ash from the center of the Earth.
Was there anything that told you that there might be a problem?
Everything told us that we might have a problem. We wouldn't have been there if we didn't think it was dangerous.
But no one expected what would happen when they were on the rim and deep in the crater. No one expected how many of them would never come home.
When you see that giant, which is throbbing, it's alive, it's not a pile of dead rocks, it's very much happening today, it's gripping.
Dr. Stanley Williams is a geologist at Arizona State University. It was Williams who in January 1993 brought together the world's elite volcano specialists, 50 of them from 14 countries, to study galeras. But even among the top guns gathered here, Williams stands out.
Am I maverick? Yeah, that's right. I'm very aggressive, very assertive of my following my own course. I'm a professor of geology, I'm going to do my thing.
Williams says conquering galeras, learning to predict its behavior, was his obsession. It would lead to an expedition that would end in death and disaster, and pose questions that today still rattle the scientific community. Should Stanley Williams have known what was about to happen on that fateful January day?
Galeras will erupt. We don't know when, but galeras will erupt again.
Marta Calvacci, a student of Stanley Williams, who was born in Pasto, has studied the volcano for 10 years. She's climbed to its misty summit dozens of times. 5 miles below, she directs the town's seismological observatory. Here, 24 hours a day, 6 sensors connected to galeras monitor its activity. Needles etching the pulse of the restless volcano.
We gotta get out, David. It's moving this way. Get out.
The greatest danger from galeras? Deadly pyroclastic flows. White-hot clouds of ash and lava like this one on the island of Montserrat. Rushing at 100 miles an hour, it incinerates everything in its path. In 1936, this pyroclastic flow from galeras stopped just short of the town. But despite the danger, Pasto's population has grown to nearly 500,000.
Do you hear anything? ¿Se oye ruido? ¿Se siente algo? Do you feel anything?
Tiembla.
The earth shakes? Tiembla?
And yet so many here seem oblivious to the danger. These children go to school right on the side of the volcano.
Are you afraid of the volcano? ¿Le tienen miedo al volcán?
No.
No. The potential for disaster is very real.
Yes, and I think the potential for disaster depends on the people, not on the volcano.
What do you mean?
People are getting too close to the volcano.
But none would get as close as Stanley Williams and his fellow volcanologists. They're a select breed, just a few hundred in the world. In the last 2 decades, 23 of them have been killed on active volcanoes. And yet Williams would lead a dozen of his colleagues right over the edge and into Galeras's very active crater.
It's a dangerous, crazy thing, but people do it. Why? You just have to make that judgment. Do things look particularly threatening today? Yeah, stay behind. That day, no signs were showing up.
But what about this? For days before the expedition, seismographs recorded a series of small earthquakes known as tornillos. Some scientists say they can foreshadow an eruption. Was this a warning? Williams doesn't think so. And so the team heads for the summit. Andy Adams, a geologist from Los Alamos, New Mexico.
It was a fun thing. We were going to have a good time. We were going to go into this volcano, take a few samples.
But the mood would soon change. Getting to the summit of Galeras can be harrowing, as our team discovered just a few weeks ago when we set out to reach the crater. We leave well before dawn. By first light, we enter the restricted zone that leads to the summit. We check in with the monitoring station and then continue. The road is treacherous, with cliffs dropping off thousands of feet. There are man-made dangers, too. We are warned that the military has seeded the volcano's slopes with landmines to discourage leftist guerrillas. We're approaching the summit when suddenly we're socked in, blinded by the mist, unable to go any further.
I'm right beneath the summit of Galeras, and as you can see, the whole dome of this volcano is shrouded in a sea of clouds. At 14,000 feet, temperatures are below freezing. The air is so thin, it literally takes your breath away. You get dizzy after walking just a few steps. It was here on that January morning that Stanley Williams and his colleagues descended into the throat of Galeras.
It was 9 a.m. You're looking at video taken that very day. The scientists reached the summit. Their staging area, a military outpost, perched on the volcano's outer rim. Half a mile away is the cone and the crater. You need ropes to get in and out of there.
You go down, descending something like 700 feet on a steep slope of rubble, loose rocks. You go down across this moat.
It looks like a moonscape, and as they reach the crater, this is what it sounds like. The deck of an aircraft carrier, with jets taking off. Hot sulfuric gases known as fumaroles, roaring from vents in galeras.
Sort of fighting the giant, you're trying to outsmart it sometimes, dancing around the edge of danger and walking away.
Williams and his group are not alone. Colombian cameraman Mario Regalado and a reporter are here too, videotaping the mission. Williams would later insist that he's careful not to linger, that he wants his team to get their work done and then get off the volcano as soon as possible. But the videotape suggests Williams is in no rush at all.
The volcano didn't do anything different. It was not putting up more gas. We weren't feeling earthquakes.
But cameraman Regalado, sitting below, inside the crater, begins to feel the earth shake under him. A tingling sensation shoots up his legs.
I felt a very strong vibration.
Like the earth wanted to swallow you, como se lo que quería comer el mundo, la tierra.
But Regalado continues to shoot until his camera runs out of tape. He climbs out of the crater. It would save his life. Disaster is just seconds away.
When we come back, the eruption. How many will survive the mountain's outburst of energy? That's next. Back now to the slopes of Galeras, an unstable, unpredictable volcano. As John Quinones continues the story, a team of leading volcanologists is on the topmost slopes. The scientists are there to learn about the forces that lurk beneath the crater's crust. But their lesson is about to be more dramatic than any might have expected. In a matter of seconds, the mountain will unleash its awesome power.
1:15 p.m. More than 3 hours after climbing down into the steaming volcano, the scientists, 12 of them, are still there. With Stanley Williams on the edge of the crater is Colombian geologist Jose Arles Zapata. Then a sound.
A few rocks tumble down the crater, which happens all the time.
But then more rocks.
Happened, no big deal. Happened again, not much. Happened again, and the idea is we ought to get out of here.
But it's too late. Suddenly, a massive blast.
Powerful explosion shredded the rocks in pieces.
There's confusion, fear, panic.
Esto es lo normal.
Normal, he says, yet it's anything but. Galeras is erupting.
It all happens with a blink of the eye, essentially, with warp speed.
Molten missiles firing from the crater at speeds faster than a bullet.
Big chunks were flying in all directions. I mean, the size of a car or a refrigerator or a football at high speed.
I could hear them, coming in, just going all around me.
Geologist Andy Adams, that's him there on the cone's outer ridge, ducks for cover.
I just kind of dived into the sidewall and tried to crawl underneath my hard hat.
In the throat of the volcano, inside the crater itself, 2 scientists, a Russian and a Colombian, are collecting volcanic gases. They die instantly, vaporized by the explosion of ash and white-hot rock. On the opposite rim of the crater, 3 others are pulverized by a barrage of shooting stone. And next in the eruption's deadly line of fire, standing just outside the crater, is Stanley Williams.
Desperately, he tries to outrun the fusillade of glowing rocks.
The first nasty one broke my skull, knocked me flat. I got up and ran not very far before the next ones shattered and essentially sheared off my right leg. My left leg was broken as well, but I was driven to get out of there, to say the least. I fell on my face. I was on fire by that time because the rocks were incandescent. So I had to rise around and get that under control. People are dead in front of me, around me. There's other people running around in this complete mayhem.
And remember that cameraman who ran out of videotape? He survives and frantically searches for his friend, geologist Jose Arles Zapata. When he finds him and turns him over, a volcanic rock has pierced his skull.
The rock entered him here and exited here in such a way that when I turned him, I was looking through his brain to the other side.
Andy Adams staggers into the command post, dazed and stunned.
I don't want to do this. I don't want to.
No quiere hacerlo. No, thank you. No.
Another American volcanologist is wounded and bleeding, his parka riddled with holes from volcanic shrapnel. He and Adams try to sort out who's dead and who might still be saved.
Louis, with help, and Andrew McFarland with help, can make it up. With help. Okay, not by himself.
You got to send somebody down there.
This survivor somehow makes it to safety on his own, though both of his legs are broken, and he's in shock. Half a mile down the volcano, below the chaos, leading her own team, Marta Calvacci.
There was this noise, and then people start to run in different directions.
She and an American geologist, Patty Mathis, race back up to help. As Martha reaches the summit, she finds Andy Adams.
I handed her my hard hat to say, hey, if you're going in there, wear this, because you don't know what it's going to do. And those two ladies are the true heroes here. They went back in while the rest of us were scared.
Finally, Martha reaches the top of the crater and finds Williams barely alive.
He was, well, in very bad shape. He was all covered with ash. And he couldn't move.
The women carry him out to rescue workers waiting with a stretcher. A rock has nearly severed his ear and lodged in his brain. He has third-degree burns and is freezing in the frigid winds. It's been more than 3 hours since Galeras exploded. Paramedics lift Williams into the helicopter for the flight to the Pasto Hospital. It takes 3 days to recover the dead. Jose Arles, British geologist Jeff Brown, Colombian Fernando Cuenca. As for the others, Carlos Trujillo, Russian Igor Menyulov, and Colombian Nestor Garcia, only traces are found. In all, 9 men die on Galeras that day. 5 others are wounded.
Yeah, this was a big mistake to take these people in the crater that day.
Victoria Bruce, a journalist and geologist, has written her own book about the disaster, No Apparent Danger. She writes that Williams made critical mistakes. For example, why didn't Williams insist on hard hats and protective flame-retardant clothing for everyone? Andy Adams, one of the few who wore them, says he was ridiculed by the others.
Some of my colleagues were tittering at me. Look at Andy, he's all dressed up, no place to go.
But Bruce's most serious charge is dramatic. She says that Williams should have known that Galeras was about to erupt. And she points to this. Remember those tornillos, the small earthquakes that were seen on seismographs for days before the eruption? Well, she says the same pattern of tornillos was detected the last time Galeras erupted 6 months before.
Williams knew that the volcano had these signals, and I believe that he chose to ignore them.
The crux of her accusations are basically that these special long-period tornillo had taken place and clearly said, it's going to erupt. Well, sorry.
Williams insists that at the time, no one knew for sure what the series of small earthquakes meant.
Victoria Bruce writes that there was no reason for these people to die, that it was indeed irresponsible, that you could have prevented it.
I am not at all responsible for the death of my friends. I led them in there to learn. It tricked us, basically.
It tricked you.
The volcano held back its secret.
Galeras not only tricked Stanley Williams, it also changed him. He was once fearless, stubborn, arrogant. Today, he's humbled by the awesome power of the volcano he could not master.
You literally went to hell and back.
The Stanley who walked in that day never came out. I, Stu, Mark, and Had he, well, I'll say he's carried out a different person. Always will be, I don't have a choice.
It changed you that much?
Yes.
What Galeras did not change in Stanley Williams was his deep passion for volcanoes. Despite 17 operations on his legs, Williams has returned to the mountain 6 times. These days, though, he always wears a hard hat and protective clothing. After the break, men who were sentenced to death, who lost years of their lives on death row. What happens when they're finally freed?
Here's $10 a coat. Goodbye.
The world looked on this week as America executed Timothy McVeigh, guilty of an appalling crime. But what of those facing the death sentence for something they didn't do? What if you were languishing in solitary, knowing you should be on the outside? In the US, dozens of people have been freed from death row after being proved innocent. But as Cynthia McFadden reports, when they come out of jail, they face yet another incredible blow.
For 14 years, Michael Graham has prayed for this day, the day he would walk off Louisiana's death row to freedom, cleared of the 2 murders he always said he did not commit. So what does the state give him? He gets $10 and a coat, the same thing every departing prisoner gets, even the guilty ones.
Oh, we just discovered you didn't do this. Here's $10 a coat. Goodbye. And talk about a crime. That's a crime.
Attorney John Holridge saved Graham from death by proving his innocence. Now he wants to save the rest of Graham's life by helping him try to get a lot more than $10.
What would you take for a year of your life?
In Texas, attorney Randy Schaefer is fighting a similar battle for this man, Anthony Robinson.
Forget a year of your life. How about a year of your life being treated like a rapist or a murderer by guards and inmates who are equally dangerous in their own ways? I don't think you really can put a number on it.
Robinson is so scarred by being wrongfully convicted of rape and serving 10 years in prison for it that he doesn't go anywhere without this folder.
Without it, I feel like at any point I could be grabbed and sent back to prison.
It's a document signed last November by then-Governor George W. Bush that makes it official. Robinson is innocent.
Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I just have to get up and walk around to make sure I'm not still in the cage. It's not something you can just all of a sudden wake up and, okay, I'm free, you know, and everything goes away.
It's impossible for most people to comprehend, while others are marrying, buying a home, having their first child. You are in prison. It's not just some technicality. You are actually innocent.
It doesn't matter how much you yell that you're innocent. I mean, there's nobody there to hear it.
No one cares.
Not even if you'd never been in trouble with the law before. 15 years ago, Anthony Robinson had graduated from a top college and served in the military, but none of that mattered.
I'd worked very hard to escape, you know, the confines of being raised in the ghetto, and then you finally get out and you say, okay, I made it through. And then all of a sudden somebody says, no, you didn't.
Wrongly identified as a rapist by a white woman, his dreams vanished.
And they grab you and they drag you and they throw you into a pit. They stick you in a cage and say, all your work doesn't mean squat. Your life doesn't mean squat.
You were in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Wrong place, wrong time. And the truth just doesn't matter.
It wasn't until he'd served 10 years in prison and was released that Robinson was finally able to prove with DNA testing that he was innocent. Michael Graham knows exactly what it's like to be an innocent man trapped behind bars.
I was numb. I couldn't believe that it was, you know, happening.
When he was barely out of his teens, Graham was railroaded, convicted of 2 murders. 14 years later, his lawyers proved prosecutors relied on witnesses they had every reason to know were untruthful. Nevertheless, Graham was sent to death row and a cell just like this one, where he spent 23 hours a day for more than 5,000 days.
I just sit and think about what it would be like to fish again, especially with my mom. That was really the only relief I had in there, just
dreaming.
It's just so long. It's just 14 years of misery.
I get out at 37 years old, got to try to rebuild my life from scratch.
Anybody else want the strawberries?
Graham, Robinson, and hundreds of others say society can at least try to make it up to them, not just for what happened inside their prison cells,
It's recording now.
but for what they missed on the outside. Graham's brothers, Bobby and Chris, grew up without him. So many once-in-a-lifetime events gone forever. How much is this day worth when Bobby graduated from grade school in 1992?
How does it feel to be graduating?
Or what do you give for missing Chris score his first touchdown in a high school football game
Touchdown!
in 1995?
How did it feel as Chris's mama when he scored that touchdown?
It was great as hell.
Every day I wake up, I'd ask God, please protect my family. Don't let anything happen to them.
You beg some lawyer to give you a chance, to listen to you. You beg your family to believe in you, to stand by you.
Anthony Robinson says at first his siblings did support him, but even so, the strain of his time in prison ripped the family apart. Now, even freedom, he says, hasn't really improved things.
There's talk of compensation. There's recognition that you've lost something. Not just that we put you in a cage and released you, but that you've actually lost something.
Everybody's thinking, oh, they spill hot coffee on you, McDonald's, and you can recover money. So certainly, if you were wrongfully convicted and you spent all these horrible years in jail, you're going to get a lot of money. Well, you don't.
Few attorneys know more about the wrongfully convicted than Barry Scheck, a pioneer in using DNA to free innocent people.
Hallelujah! Praise God!
Scheck can point to hundreds of Michael Grahams and Anthony Robinsons who've been freed from prisons. Over the last 10 years, 50 innocent people have been released from death row alone.
Isn't this wonderful?
And what did most of them get? Virtually nothing.
14 states have statutes, but many of these states have measly compensation.
Of the 14 states, here are some examples. In North Carolina, the state will pay $10,000 for each year wrongfully imprisoned, up to $150,000. In Wisconsin, it's $5,000 a year with a cap of $25,000. And in Texas, the limit is also $25,000, which for Anthony Robinson comes out to $2,500 a year.
What does that say about me as a person in the eyes of the state of Texas?
What does it say to you?
It says that we don't really care, that you don't really count.
Back in Louisiana, where Michael Graham was a prisoner, there's talk of creating a compensation plan.
We have to put this compensation question in context with our budget debate. We are a poor state.
But State Senator Jay Darden opposes such a bill. He is the budget chairman and thinks there are many higher priorities for taxpayers' money.
You don't think the state of Louisiana should be obliged to even a penny to these people?
No, I do not. A jury of 12 people judged evidence and concluded that someone was guilty.
But you just want to wash your hands of it. When there's a mistake made, you say, okay, mistake made, next player.
The fact that now there is an overturning of a conviction based upon DNA evidence that was not even available at the time does not suggest to me that the state was somehow wrong or at fault.
And the destruction of that person's life is worth nothing?
You can draw the line where you can say we're going to compensate here and we're not going to compensate here.
It's a cold position.
It is, and I understand that.
We told the Graham family that Senator Darden doesn't believe the state owes Michael anything more than the $10 they already paid him.
If the state cripples someone, they pay them. And that's all they did to him was cripple him. 14 years and the rest of his life.
If the compensation is based on a sense that this is a worthwhile person, he's a member of society who suffered a great wrong, then the compensation should indicate that. If society says, well, he's just one of them, then the compensation would also indicate that.
So you say we'll know a lot about ourselves by how much money you and others like you receive.
Exactly.
That's it from 2020 this week. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next Sunday, 7:30 on 3. Until then, have a good week and good night.